Hey guys, welcome to week 3 already. This week, for my short lecture, what I want to start doing is touching on some um, either some key concepts or key historical events or incidences that have taken place um, from our weekly readings to maybe start giving you some ideas on a possible topic for your paper. Remember, um, for our assignment, you need to write a research paper on a historical criminal justice event or incident that helped shape some facet of modern day progressive law enforcement. So I think the key here is that your topic needs to center around law enforcement. And so this week, in looking over our chapter readings for Module 3, I want to go ahead and talk about Sir Robert Peel, because I think he, for his time, was a very progressive thinker in terms of the development and implementation of something that we take for granted today, which is law enforcement. So let's go ahead and just delve into Sir Robert Peel. And more importantly, we're going to talk about Robert Peel's principles. Our book doesn't really discuss the principles per se. They discuss Robert Peel. They, in a nonchalant way, talk about his principles, but I'm going to go into more detail on his principles so you will have a better idea as to his overall impact on modern day progressive law enforcement. So let me go ahead and disappear here. I'm going to go into the corner. There we go. Okay, so Sir Robert Peel is often referred to as the father of modern day law enforcement. And he provided 9 principles to guide what then became known as the London Metropolitan Police. And if you've ever been to London, the cops over there are often referred to as bobbies, and that's really in honor of who he was. And their mission at the time, and probably still is to protect and serve the public. All right, so that's who Robert Peel is. This gives you some ideas to when he was around from 1788 to 1850 is his lifespan. So he had considerable influence in terms of the beginning of this fundamental change in society, and that is establishing a paid police force. Now, who was he? Sir Robert Peel was Home Secretary and later became Prime Minister of England and London. He proposed the creation of a professional police force in London. However, he needed to use caution as he proposed this legislation because many British citizenry were apprehensive about having either a national police or a local police. Initially, Peel wanted to develop and implement a national police, but later decided to focus more on London Metropolitan Police as his sort of test site in determining the ability of government to create such an arm of the government. Part of what he created allowed paid police officers who patrolled in regular beats. They wore a uniform. The organization was paramilitary, much like it is today. So amazingly, several of these early key concepts, such as beats and wearing uniforms and having a paramilitary structure, is still used today in law enforcement, not only in the United States, but elsewhere. I mean, we typically wear uniforms. Uniform insignia is similar to that of the military. For example, sergeants have 3 stripes and lieutenants have 1 bar and so forth. So very early on, he mirrored the military as the basis for the organizational structure of policing. So Robert Peel had his 9 principles, and when you look at these 9 principles, we could probably break them down into a couple of different categories. So the first one is, we'll just call it the mission of police. Now, Robert Peel didn't title these as such. It's something that I think this first principle ties nicely into. In other words, what is the purpose of the police? Well, he said the basic mission for which police exist is to prevent crime and disorder as an alternative to the repression of crime and disorder by military force and severity of legal punishment. In other words, prior to the establishment of the police, if there were to be some type of riot or unrest, then the government at the time would call in the military. And Peel didn't think that that was appropriate use of the military in terms of policing the citizenry. That's not why we have the military. And even today, oftentimes, if there's a significant social unrest, most people are apprehensive about having the military step in. And usually if a state has to call in its National Guards, it's often viewed as, things must be really out of control. So he tried to lessen the impact of using the military and create some other branch of government to work with the citizens in an effort to reduce crime and disorder. So that, in essence, I think would fall under what we would call the mission of the police. Now, his second and third principle tie nicely into the need for public support. And there's a lot going on in law enforcement today where we are addressing or trying to address this need for public support. In other words, police need the public. We need the public in order to solve crimes. We need the public to be more effective. And so his principles number 2 and 3 specifically address this need for public support. In principle number 2, he says, the ability of the police to perform their duties is dependent upon public approval of the police existence, actions, behavior, and the ability of the police to secure and maintain public respect. And that's going to be key. And so local government especially, people have a voice at the local level through the local council representatives or council meetings. And oftentimes people may address the council in discussing either something that the police did that was good or maybe something that the police did was bad. But regardless, the police need the public. We need public approval, all right? Because if we don't have public approval, then we're going to end up with some level of collective resistance. So the people need to support the police, and the police need to support the public. Number 3, the police must secure the willing cooperation of the public in a viability observance of the law and be able to secure and maintain public support. Okay, so we need to have the ability to maintain public support. And that's going to be key. All right, so the police must secure the willing cooperation of the public in voluntary observance of the law and be able to secure and maintain public support. So we need to get the people to obey the law. And that is the key part of what we do. All right, try to get that need for public support. Next are principles 4 and 5, which could be tied to the use of force and the impartiality of the police. And in this, he talks about a couple different things, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'm moving my picture up here, so maybe you can't see it, but I sure can. So number 4 is the degree of cooperation of the public that can be secured diminishes proportionately the necessity for the use of physical force and compulsion in achieving police objectives. So we need the public support. So if we use some level of force, the public must recognize that force as having been necessary. Where the public begins to question the level and use of force in a particular circumstance, then that is going to lead to less cooperation and public support. And in some respects, you're beginning to see that in some of the allegations against the police in their use of force, especially nowadays where everyone has a cell phone and a cell phone has a video camera. That became recently evident. I was reading an LA Times article where the federal authorities have stepped in and are going to prosecute, I think, 3 Pomona police officers for using force at an event at the LA County Fair this past September, October. And so, that need to maintain that level of public support is very important. And if we don't, then we begin to lose that respect, and it becomes a little bit more difficult in trying to achieve our law enforcement objectives. Number 5 is the police seek and preserve public favor, not by catering to public opinion, but by constantly demonstrating absolute impartial service to the law and complete independence of policy, and without regard to the justice or injustice of the substance of individual laws, by ready offering an individual service and friendship to all members of the society without regard to their race or social standing, by ready exercise of courtesy and friendly good humor, and by ready offering of individual sacrifice in protecting and preserving life. All right, so basically, in other words, we need to maintain a level of impartiality. Okay, regardless of your role in society, in terms of our ability to investigate a situation or deal with a problem, we need to do it in an impartial way, and that's essential. We can't be showing favoritism to one group over another, because that'll cause significant problems. Okay, so again, excess of force is to be avoided, and impartiality is vital. The need to be fair is critical in how we handle an array of field problems that police have to deal with today. Excess of force is to be avoided, impartiality vital. Rule number 6, the police should use physical force to the extent necessary to secure observance of the law and to restore order only when the exercise of persuasion, advice, and warning is found to be insufficient to achieve police objectives, and police should only use minimum degree of physical force which is necessary on any particular occasion for achieving a police objective. So today we talk about, and we train police officers on this continuum of force. In other words, first you start with something simple, verbal. Sir, please sit down, or sir, please come back here. Then you might move into the next level, which might be touching or pointing or grabbing an individual to get him to comply with your commands. And then obviously it can go through a continuum to the end, which is, use of deadly force. So in terms of the police officers being able to apply force, he understood the impact that the use of force would have. In other words, he knew that police would have to use force, but the question became, at what level? And so it is critical, and it's still a big issue today on the use of force, is why did the police have to shoot somebody? Why did the police have to do this? Why didn't they use these other tools that they have available to them, less than lethal? So it still is problematic in some respects today, depending on the situation. But I think what's important to know is that Pilby realized this early on, that police would have to use force in order to gain compliance. And that force that was used needed to be the least amount of force necessary to get a person to comply with what the police needed that person to do. Okay, so I think that was a really, really important concept. And I'm going to move on to the next principle, which is unity between the police and the public. But I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to start afresh because my videos can only run for 15 minutes, right? So this is the end of part 1, and I'll be delving into part 2 here in just a minute. Thank you guys so much.